Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining this meetup from Teknasyon. I appreciate so many people coming on Saturday. It's generally your time you want to spend with your family, and then you're here just to learn something new. And I will be talking about monorepos, one thing which I love, and a little bit about myself. I think Fatih already gave the introduction. So I'm Santosh. I live in Hamburg in Germany. I'm originally from India. I lived in a city called Mumbai. I think one of the city which people knows. Good that people knows that city. Yeah. And I work at CodeRabbit as a developer advocate. So I'm focused mostly on the open source, helping open source maintainers to maybe see how we can support them financially or with code review, because AI. Everyone is trying to become an open source contributor suddenly. I don't know why. And then I've been writing code since 2008. I was just having a chat with Fatih yesterday, and it was like we started around the same time, though he created his GitHub account way earlier than me. And I'm also a GitHub star, Google developer expert for Angular. I know someone was complaining about there are not enough Angular developers here, but please, we are all developers, right? Just remove Angular or React. And yeah, previously I was working as a staff engineer in a company called Celonis, and yeah, it's been a few months I joined CodeRabbit. So let's go ahead and get started with Monorepo. So my first introduction to Monorepo was maybe way earlier. I thought that's Monorepo, and maybe many of you already know that. How many of you have worked on maybe .NET or Java? Yeah, some hands there. So 6 years ago, when I was doing Angular, of course, a client approached me and said, hey, we have one successful app for a customer, and what we want to do is we want to actually expand it to multiple customers. It means we don't want to invest, copy paste the same app and then write the code for them. We want to actually share the design system without any struggle, and we want to deliver faster. So we don't have much time. We want to give them a POC maybe in a month. And that was my first introduction. So I was like, okay, what should I do? So I started looking at the things, right? And that's how I landed into world of monorepos. So I'll talk about first, the thing is, of course, if you have to use a tool, you have to understand why to use that tool, right? It's not like you should directly jump into and start using a tool because someone told you, oh, this is a good tool, or AI tells you to use this tool, right? Nowadays, it's not even you or your teammates who are deciding. It's more AI is deciding, right? So I'll give you some example. Who knows polyrepos? Concept of polyrepos? Yeah, one hand. Cool. And I think most of people, we are aware, what does it mean? So in polyrepos, actually the concept is your entire code base is distributed across multiple repositories. Simple concept, right? So you might have a design system somewhere, you might have, let's say, your backend API somewhere else, you might have your front end somewhere else. Now how many people knows polyrepos? Still few hands. Cool. So this is a very common problem, right? So in industry, if you join a new company, this is generally what you will see. They have 4 apps, 4 different repositories. But let's see what's the problem. Especially with design system. I think design system was a very new concept around 2019, 2020. Every company or every organization wanted to have their design system suddenly. I don't know why. Everyone is building their own design system. And they started doing and building and publishing it on NPM or any maybe package manager, right? Whatever package manager you're using. If you're using Flutter, you might be using something else. But if you're using Node.js or JavaScript ecosystem, it might be NPM. That worked really well, I think, for a time being, right? So until unless you expanded and started using the same design system across multiple apps. And then there came the problem. Now, out of 4 apps, 2 apps says, hey, we cannot upgrade to the latest version. then we said, okay, what can we do? The industry said, okay, you can have multiple versions, right? You can actually publish multiple versions of your packages and then just use 2 versions here, 2 versions there, and then create a mess. And that's what industry did for a long time. So bug fetch, you have to publish like 4 releases, different releases, because everyone is using different version. And if you have to roll back something, that's a mess. Now you have to figure out like what's breaking, where it is breaking, and then maybe it takes multiple iteration. It's not like you can just directly go roll back something, because you know there might be consequences. So this is how it looks like. So if I have to show a diagram, like you make changes, you build, you test, you publish to npm, and then you go on a spree to actually just go ahead and upgrade it wherever you are using that particular design system. And then you finally get your code merged. And this is a simple example, like generally how your front end and back end might be distributed. So you have your front end. This is another auth service, product service, order service, concept of microservices, right? It's very famous again for no reason, right? So I think we can have better architecture without microservices as well. And this all code is distributed across multiple repositories. So running them locally is again a challenge, because you have to serve your front end, you have to serve 3 different backends, and then finally make it work. So whenever a new team member joins, he's like, okay, I want to resign next day. Just kidding. No. Okay, so let's see. The big misconception we have, right? People think like one repository is equals to one project. That's how we think. But you know, one project can actually span multiple repositories. That's what Polyrepo is. And then one repository can contain multiple projects, which is the concept of Monorepo. So you can keep everything together to make your life easier. Now it's up to you whether you want to make your life easier or you want to keep struggling like we are in 2020. So let's see. So Monorepo, Polyrepo, and Monolith. So the people who raised their hand and said, yes, we use Java, .NET, actually we were using monoliths, right? So it was a single deployment unit. You create multiple projects, you still have multiple projects. So because a lot of developers I speak to, they get confused like, oh, but we were doing this in .NET or Java, but that's not the same concept. So it's actually monoliths or something, it's an architectural pattern you follow. So your entire project or .NET or Java project is a single deployable unit, right? So you can actually build them and deploy as a single unit. Polyrepo, you have 100 projects, 100 repos, and you are having fun. And then Monorepo is where you have all the projects in a single repository. I think it was made the word actually was made very famous by Google first. Google still has every project in a Monorepo. So for example, the projects which you use, Flutter, right, or Angular, they are actually part of single monorepository inside Google. So anyone who joins Google, like they can access everything, and they can make changes across any projects where they want to contribute. So this is like how your maybe Monorepo can look like. So for example, you have analytics app, dashboard app, admin dashboard, file management library, analytics API, tools, everything into a single repository. If I talk about Polyrepo, this might be different repositories scattered across your GitHub org. And yeah, I created them with my hands. There are some images which I created using Gemini, but this is like hand drawn. So when should you use Monorepo? The answer is always there, just kidding. So let's go ahead and talk about, right, why you should actually choose Monorepo. So, and what are the cases where you should be choosing it? So if you have multiple projects sharing your code and dependencies, of course, the example is the most famous one, design system, right? And then I think in industry, people don't stop at something when they figure out, okay, sharing design system was a bad idea. People started creating shared libraries. They said, okay, I need this function probably in 4 apps. Let's create a shared library. And they started publishing it. The other thing which is very important is atomic changes, right? So for example, if you have a breaking change, it's very hard to identify in a Polyrepo. because you have to first figure out like if this is a problem in your front end, your back end, or maybe some other services or other library you are using. So it's hard to figure that out. API updates become a problem. You have to coordinate with everyone, and then your teammates who is responsible for updating API says, oh, I'm going for a week holiday, right? So meet me after a week. So, and then you're stuck, and your project manager says, when are we going to get this feature? We needed this yesterday. So, and then large scale refactoring. This is even much worse. Like if I have to do a large scale refactoring in a Polyrepo, where you are not the only owner of the code base, then it's again a problem, right? Because different teams, different priorities. Your problem might not be a problem for somebody else. So, and then if you need a strong code reuse culture, for example, in Google, this code sharing culture is very strong, right? And if you want to implement something like this in your org, where anyone can join and like contribute to your code base, and then one thing which happens in Polyrepo a lot, people writing the same code. They will actually figure out, okay, yeah, this guy actually did this, let's copy paste. So a lot of copy paste, but there is no invention which is happening in your code base. It's just copy paste. And then interconnected products. For example, if you have micro frontends, this is a very good use case for Monorepo, especially micro frontend is amazing. And then if you have a shared backend, of course, that makes sense. And then why team loves Monorepos is, of course, like for code sharing and reusability, right? So you can like reshare your code and then reuse it. Atomic commits, so you get single commit across all the changes from front end to back end to maybe your shared library design system. You can just do everything in a single commit. So it's the advantage is it's easy to figure out like who messed up. Like rather than having 10 different commits from 10 different people, you have a single author, which is you, and then you figure out, okay, I broke the APIs, which happens most of the cases, right? And then simplified dependencies. This is the worst thing which happens when you work on a Polyrepo. 10 different repositories, everyone is using different package manager, everyone using different version of some package, and then you're lost. Like if you have to work on a different repositories, you download it, do npm install, and then you're lost. Like, oh, this uses node 20, this uses node 22, so what should I do now? Then you have to go ahead and install npm, right? And I'm not sure like how you do in Flutter, to be frank. And then unified CI/CD, right? So you get a single CI/CD to control the entire application or your entire product, I would say, which is again a great advantage. And better collaboration. So you can speak to your teammates more often than working in a silo. If you don't like to talk to them, yeah, that's your problem then. So I'll give you a small example like how we were able to remove 800 KB from our code base by just moving to Monorepos. So as I said, like we have this common thing, like if you want to share a code, maybe let's go ahead and create a shared library. That's what we did at Celonis. There was a library which was created, I think I saw the first commit was in 2016, and that library existed till 23. So anyone who wanted to add a new function, they just added it there. Who was using it? No one. Why it was added? Because, oh, it might be used later, and after 7 years, no one is using it. And more code was actually added into that library, and suddenly it became very big. And the problem is, of course, the library became very big. Now someone needs to maintain it, right? And 50% of the code, I think at the end we realized 80% of the code could be deleted. We can just delete it. Don't need to actually even keep it there or move across the different projects which we have, because we had a micro front-end applications. So every application was built separately. And once we removed it, okay. So it actually says legacy code, by the way. It's not visible, I realized it. I thought like red will look good, but. So all the legacy code, we removed it, and then finally, most of the apps had like 5 KB, 10 KB code remaining from that library. So, and that was possible because we moved to design system first. We took that step, the first step, right, to make sure like we have a good maintainable code base. Now, when I talk about atomic changes and when I talk about Gemini, this is what Gemini gave to me. I just created some prompts, and then so when I talk about atomic changes, right? So you have a single commit connecting all the changes which you have made. So starting from, okay, you want to update your calculate function, you have your front end changes, your back end changes, and you can trace it in a single repository. But if it's scattered across, this is how it is, right? So you actually have, maybe you have to change your UI, you have to change your authentication layer, you have to change your design system, and then these repositories and commits are scattered. So you have no idea. Someone is just telling you, I created this API, just go ahead and use it, and then you're struggling to figure out like why this API is not available, and then they tell you, I forgot to publish it, right? So it will be available soon. So yep, so with atomic changes you get like unified purpose, why you made the change, until unless you are really good at writing your commits, which I'm not. Glad we don't need to. Now AI is doing most of it, right? I think for most of us, I think the commit message and commit title is coming from some AI. And then you can also split your commits to a small and focused changes. One thing which we saw when we were in Monorepo is people used to club a lot of changes together because they want to ship faster, right? At the end, what's the goal? The goal is your product manager needed something yesterday and you need to satisfy him or her. So just kidding. But yeah, with monorepos, actually you can just like keep creating smaller commits, and it's easy to figure out like what broke. And you can of course make them testable as well and easy to understand, right? So this is an example how a polyrepo can break things. For example, you have an add product function, you just said okay, let's update this, I need category as well in this particular function. Front end said, I don't care, you never ask me. And then somehow this is in production, and it fails, right? Because on production it says, oh, there is another third API, third parameter which I need, but it doesn't exist anymore. And I'm giving a small example, and you might be wondering, oh, this might not be a case. Believe me, before we moved to Monorepo and Celonis, this was business as usual. It means we used to get like every week something like this. And with Monorepo, we realized, oh, it's easy. Now we can actually capture it. Simplified dependencies. I think I was talking about 10 different projects having 10 different packages. Someone is using React 4. Does React 4 exist? No. Okay, good. So someone is using maybe React 0.16 or something, and then someone is on React 14, 15, 16, and then you're struggling between multiple projects. Because I think now in many organizations, you are not working on a single project anymore. So you're working across, right? You're trying to be useful wherever you can, just like AI is trying to do. Yeah, cool. Unified CI/CD. So this is also an example from our own workflow. So before we moved to Monorepo approach, what we had was 40 projects. We moved to 40, but it was like 24 micro front-end apps we had, and everyone had their own CI/CD pipeline. So everyone used to build, run linting, run testing, and then publish it on NPM, and then share it, and then the entire micro front-end was attached together in a app which was just an app, simple app. Like it was doing nothing, it was just collecting all the artifacts and pushing it together to make it work. Then we moved to Monorepo with our micro front-end approach, and we had a single CI/CD pipeline. So we could build all the 24, which actually grew up to 40 apps within like 2 years. So to create all those 24 apps, it took us 7 years. But from there, just 2 years, we started creating more apps. We became more productive. We started shipping faster because of single CI/CD pipeline. So we know there is no discussion about if we need this particular linting rule or not. A lot of teams still fight it. Oh, do I need this linting rule? Do I not need to worry about it? And they waste your time, right? It's not useful. Another good example another good thing which happened once we moved to Monorepo was transparency, right? Now everyone can see everything. So it's not like silos we have within the team. So new developers in the team actually can see like how you are working. like what approach you take whenever you want to actually maybe implement a new feature, or if you want to do some refactor. So they can actually see that, learn from you. And then it's easy to find the code. Just think about finding a code in 10 different repositories which is available in your org versus a single code base. I mean, I know VS Code search is not that fast, but they're trying to make it fast. But there are tools, right, which can help you to make searching code fast. Especially AI. AI is smarter than us. It figures out like way faster than even like VS Code can search for the code base. Where are the changes? And then learning from the best practices. So let's say someone joins your team and then the person is actually doing some good work. You don't have to like just go ahead and see like, oh, this is how actually things are done. For example, in my case, we had an engineer from Google who worked at Google for 18 years. And I was like so happy that I could see his code, like his approach, like the best practices he's building to the team or bringing to the team, and I could learn from them. Cross-team collaboration. My day-to-day job was like collaborating with 40 different teams, and it was all possible because of the Monorepo. I don't have to go ahead and teach them, okay, what needs to be done, like in which way. I can just build a talk or build some maybe common patterns and share it with everyone. So it became much easier. We started collaborating much faster, shipping much faster. And then it also helped us to identify who is contributing to the repository, to the Monorepo, because you know, if it's a Monorepo, there are so many things apart from shipping features which comes into the picture. Who is going to maintain all those things? Right now, there might be possibility that someone in your team has more time than you. And they can also take this opportunity to do something new. For example, new version of React is available, new version of Flutter is available. They can just go ahead and do it. Like, or someone wants to improve the CI/CD pipeline. They can just go ahead and contribute. Like, people learn, and then you also recognize people who is performing well. So let's see. There are challenges. As soon as I talk about monorepos or people hear about monorepos, they think like, oh, but you know, what in case my monorepo is too big? It will take time, right? If I have to download it, especially on the CI/CD, because it's somebody's server, right? It's not yours, but somebody's server where you have to download this code. So there are multiple ways. So for Git operations, you can always use shallow clones, which is -depth1. So you get the last whatever. You don't have to download all the branches, tail branches. This is one of the biggest problems. So if you pass -depth1, it will try to ignore all the previous branches or dead branches which are not active anymore, and it becomes faster. Sparse checkout, it's possible, so you can just check out what you need, but I think this is very less, followed in the industry. This is mostly like the big orgs like Google or Microsoft, where people just want to work with 5 projects maybe, they can just check out. Git LFS is also there for large files in case you want to store large file. I would recommend not to, but just in case you need. And Git is becoming faster, right? I mean, if you see, I'm sure like there are so many people who might have started using Git in early days, and it was mess, right? I mean, people used to hate it because when you try to download something from Git, it used to take time, but it is becoming faster, more faster. And of course, like not all monorepos are actually at Google scale. Like your monorepos will be even smaller, right? So you cannot complain about it. That's what I'm saying. And then another issue, I think this is one of the issue we had with monoliths, right? So people using Java, I heard like people using Java are still waiting for their builds to complete after 4 years. So just kidding. But this is one of the problem when people started adopting monorepos or talking about monorepos. Lot of developers who had done this monoliths, they started complaining, it's a mess when you have to build 10 different projects. It takes time, it takes ages to actually build those. So new tools are actually becoming smarter. They're not the same as your old build tools. So most of the tools actually have something called as affected detection. They can figure out from your commit what is changed and then build only those projects. And believe me, most of the developers, until unless you are maybe part of the platform team, which is looking at the entire Monorepo, won't be changing something which will affect the entire code base in day-to-day job. If you like updating your entire Monorepo like maybe once a month or twice a month, which is maybe acceptable, but you're still saving your CI/CD time for let's say 29 days, right? In a month. So you're not building everything. And then there is build caching, which is available now. I think more and more tools are actually trying to do this. Any Java developers here? No? Okay, so good. So you're not waiting for your build to complete. But build cache is something which is available in new tools. So when you try to build something on your local machine, it can read from your cache and just, if there is no change, it will just replay the changes back to you. Same can be applied on remote. So if I'm pushing a change on CI/CD, I can also get build caching functionality on my remote. But it is paid, right? I mean, you either have to pay for GitHub, where you can push the cache, or maybe you can pay to any third-party tool. I will talk about the tools in future. And then incremental build. Now, a lot of tools actually support incremental build, so you don't have to, like, as a developer, we keep committing, like, let's make a commit and then push like 10 different commits on the same branch. And you don't need to build everything again and again. So your CI or tools are actually getting smarter, so they can just do incremental builds. Okay, this was the last state, let's build on top of it, right? Let's see what changed. And then parallel execution. Now, servers are becoming expensive again. There was a time when it was cheaper. Like some people are still trying to sell the servers for cheap, but you can also distribute your tasks. When I talk about tasks, it can be build, test, linting, and you can run it on different servers. And there are tools which can actually orchestrate for you, because when it comes to the parallel execution, the biggest problem is orchestration, right? There are businesses built because of orchestration. Now people are trying to build the same business for agents, right? Now you started running 10 different agents. Who is going to orchestrate you? Oh, that's a business opportunity. Let's build it. So, and then the final result is, of course, is faster than Polyrepo, right? And then build caching, as I was talking about it. So the way build caching works is something like, it's hash based. So it takes like hash of all the projects. It can be project level, it can be Monorepo level, like the repository level, and it checks what has changed. If hash is matching, just leave it as it is. Let's see what was the last cache which was saved. Maybe it was saved in GitHub Action, or maybe NX Cloud, which is a third-party service, or maybe S3 bucket. You can also push your build artifacts on S3 bucket if you want to. And so these are like some ways how you can actually improve your build time. And then one of the misconception which we had to also go through is, there were different teams, right? We had literally 20 teams shipping the code, and then we said, let's move to Monorepo, like a single repository. And a lot of teams actually came up with an issue saying, oh, but what in case someone else tries to touch my code? Or, oh, does this means we will not have any authority on our code base? Like, these are the common questions people ask, right? You don't need to. There is already a solution baked into GitHub or GitLab, which is called code owners. How many of you know about code owners or use it? Yeah, I see few hands, right? It's very great way to actually manage. For example, this is an example where you can define which app will be controlled by which team. When I say controlled by, they are the approvals. They are the final authority who can approve any changes in this payments directory. Otherwise, nothing gets merged. So you can easily manage it in Monorepo using code owners. And of course, like the second question, right? So of course you can have like clear ownership using code owners. You can also have automated guardrails, of course, linting and everything. You can, let's say a team says, okay, we want to do things differently. There are tools, right? I think the one one thing which I have seen in last few years, which became, which changed maybe the way we review code, is linting. There are so many things which we used to just discuss and waste our time, and linting came and then killed it. No more, nitpicks, because linting, the whole point of linting was, let's kill the nitpicks. You don't need to waste your time or fighting with each other whether I should write this function in this way or that way. Just agree on it and then push it, right? So no one new can actually change the way you write your code. So you can actually have your own linting rule. For example, all the linting tools available provides APIs on top of which you can build your own linting rules and then test, right? And then you can also have contribution guidelines, like how to contribute to this monorepo, and then watch the different patterns. For example, if you are someone who is responsible for managing the monorepo, you can just use GitHub notification. I know it's a mess somehow, but still, like, you get update at least what is being pushed. And then you can also set architectural boundaries, like for example, the tool called NX provides you a way where you can say, oh, please do not use this library one into project one, or use this library only in project A, B, C. That's it. And as soon as someone tries to break it, they will get an error saying, okay, this is not allowed, right? So there are so many tools you can just build around, like taken maybe inspiration from NX. They have so many guardrails which is already baked into the tool. And then people think about this a lot. What in case someone joins and sees suddenly there are 100 projects? Of course, you will be overwhelmed as well, right? I mean, oh, wow, this code is big. Like, what I'm supposed to do here? And developers might get lost. So, to actually solve this problem, we also faced this problem when we started migrating everything to Monorepo. So we started with documentation. We said, okay, let's have a good documentation so new developers knows what needs to be done. Like how to run project A. I don't need to care about the remaining 99 projects. I just want to work on project A, how to do that. And we started writing documentation, started refactoring and have a clear project structure. So, it's easy to collaborate. Then you can also have dev containers. I think GitHub also already has this, right? So you can actually have dev containers where to set up things it's fast. You can also run it on cloud. And then selective loading, which is of course might not be a good fit for your use case because your monorepo is not that big. And then you can also have interactive guides, for example, hands-on guide, like how to contribute to this monorepo. So you give a guide like, oh, let's open your first PR, right, in this monorepo, and then people learn from it. And then we also started mentorship program at Celonis. We actually did, every year, we used to actually travel to different offices, do some workshops with the team to teach them like how to work on monorepo. So let's see, so what we have learned so far. So now we know the clear separation between monorepos and monoliths, right? So they are not same. So monoliths is an architectural pattern, but monorepos is like how you manage your repositories. Modern tools actually solve this scale problem, which many developers were worried about. So now we don't have to worry about build caching. So there is a build caching, there is an affected detection. So it takes care of what you need to build. With focused commits, like you can have, there are less chances that you will break anything big because, of course, you can have it as a maybe, because in Celonis we used to promote this as a best practice that your commit should be small. Your commits should be focused. And now if everyone is contributing to the same code, you can actually control it in a better way. And then team alignments, yeah, now you know each other in person, right? So because everyone contributes to the same code base, you learn from each other, like how to do things in a better way, all possible. But again, as usual, I'm not going to say like monorepo is the solution for your problem. Always figure out, like try it out and then see like if it works for you. Even at Celonis, we actually knew the pain point. We knew what solutions we can take, and then we said, okay, let's move to monorepo. I think this is something which will help us in long term. So some myths. So Monorepo is not equals to huge build times, which is actually a common misconception because, oh, 100 projects, it takes ages to build. No. So build caching, everything breaks together. No, because what in case you suddenly break 100 projects where the shared library responsible was actually just published with some issue, and you are not even using that code, because it's hard to figure out like if some code is being used or not in case it's a shared library and being published on npm. But in Monorepo, yes, of course you can figure it out. And only for tech giants? No, the answer is no. Of course Monorepo is for everyone. So and it's like there are some open source tools which I will talk about which you can use. So let's see the tools, right? So the first tools actually came around 2008, between 2008 and 15. It's called Bazel. How many of you heard about Bazel? Oh, you know about Bazel. I just hate this tool. Is it getting recorded? Can you delete? Okay, but it's a nice tool. I mean, it's very fast. It's from Google itself, but the learning curve is so big that probably you will give up and say, okay, let's not do this. Believe me, when I say this, Angular team tried to actually use it inside the open source projects which they have on GitHub, and they gave up. They was like, okay, it's not worth it because it's just the learning curve was too big, and to run it on Windows machine, it was a nightmare because I tried to contribute to a code base which was using Bazel, and I was like, okay, oh my god, let's not contribute to open source. And then Microsoft had something called Rush. Facebook has their own, I don't know what they use. And then 2015 to 22, this is where like a lot of new player came in, like the open source. And they started adding remote caching, affected detection, cloud native CI/CD, so many things came. So I'll just talk about few. So the popular ones are NX. How many of you know about NX? Few hands. Cool. Turborepo, I think very famous in the React ecosystem, right? And then you have normal workspaces, PNPM in Yarn, which is good, but they don't give you some of the features which NX and Turborepo offers you inbuilt. And then there are some specialized. For example, Bazel can work across your different technologies, right? So it doesn't matter like which kind of tool or which kind of project you have. Is it maybe .NET, Java? It can just take care of everything. Rush is still being maintained. I think some of the projects, open source projects, started as a copy or like a fork version of Rush. And then there is Bands for Python. I have never used it. But I'll try to compare three which I generally have used. So there is NX, there is Turborepo, and Workspaces. These are the three which I have used so far. So I don't want to walk into a space of somebody else's and say, okay, this is bad. And apart from a small time where I used Bazel. So in NX you have affected detection. It exists and it's very good. Like I'll show you an example. And then Turborepo, they added the affected flag now. I think if you are using Turborepo, just go ahead and check the added affected flag. And then Workspaces you cannot. You have to do it manually, maybe write your own way to do it. Then remote caching, NX has something called NX Cloud. They're paid offering, right? Because of course, being an open source project, you have to make money to survive. So they have NX Cloud. Vercel is of course like if you're using Turborepo, you can use Vercel, or you can use GitHub as well. You can if it allows, so you can push your cache on GitHub Action and then use it. Workspaces, of course, no. Code generation, this is what I love the most about NX, because there is a code generation support in case you want to create a new Angular or Java project. There is a CLI. There is a CLI which can help you do that. So you don't have to worry about, okay, let's go ahead and create these projects and then try to set up Monorepo on top of it. No, everything is baked in. With Turborepo, I haven't seen that. So it's like you create a project and then add some configuration on top of it. But NX is like zero configuration. You can just start using it. Learning curve, of course, requires some of the learning curve. With Turborepo, it's not, because it's just like you add into your existing repo and it starts to work. Best for, I would say, go ahead and try NX because it's an open source. so it's not basically just the enterprise, you can also use it. And Turborepo for fast-paced startups, like they want to move quickly, right? So you can use that. And then cost, of course, they all have free and paid version. So for example, NX has NX Cloud, which is the paid offering, and Turborepo also has remote caching, which is the paid version. So I'll maybe, okay, it's, so I already spoke about few of the highlights. For example, you have caching. There is one good feature which is called dependency graph visualization, and I'll show you some example rather than doing this. So I'll just, let's go back to VS Code, and so NX also has their extension which is available. You can actually just go ahead and use it, and then you can see all the helpful commands actually here. Let's see, common NX commands, and then you there is something called NX graph. What I'm using here is PNPM or no NPM. PM brand NX. As usual. So you know, this is free, so you can actually this is one of the best thing which I love about NX, like the graph. You can actually see all the projects, and then you can see the relationship, how they are related. So I can see, okay, the store end to end, of course these are like 2 projects, and then I can remove and see. So you can actually visualize the entire Monorepo and see like how they are related to each other. And this is free, for by the way. I mean, you don't have to pay anything, you can just start using it. Yep. And then it has strong plugin ecosystem. It means there is support for Java, there is support for Rust, there is support for Go, there is support for Flutter, and yeah, you don't have to do like anything by your hand. And supports multiple frameworks as well. There is a React support, there is Vue support, Angular support, and just go ahead and start using it. So the command is this: create NX workspace at latest, and then just go ahead and start using it. Turborepo also has a command, create Turborepo. You can actually just initialize it inside a new already, or you have maybe PNPM workspace, Yarn workspace, just go ahead and initialize and then start using it. And these are some language specific tools. And this talk would be incomplete without talking about AI, right? Because everyone is talking about AI. When we at Ceylonius, when we started using Monorepo, we had no idea that there will be a day where we will be in advantage, right? Now we see that. For example, now more and more code is being written by AI. So as per the recent study, there is a link which is available. I'll share the slide so you can see it. Up to 25 to 42% code is actually now being written by AI. And this is, I think we all can agree, right? I haven't written code by hand like maybe in last 6 months, right? And most of you might have done the same. So I'm not writing code, I'm just writing like creating plan, maybe doing prompting, and that's it. And then to do this, AI needs more context, because this is what is driving AI, right? If AI doesn't have a context, then you will get hallucination. And how we can give that? So new softwares are actually being written with, now AX is agentic experience when I say AX, and more new libraries or maybe new projects are being with AX in mind. Even Angular team recently decided the new era will be, of course, or the new version of Angular will be more focused on providing the best agentic experience for Angular. So it's not like developer experience. Now people are not talking about developer experience anymore, because developers are not building. It's the agents which are building. So now DX is gone. Welcome to the era of AX. So let's see what causes a lot of friction, right? For example, in Monorepo. So you have multiple apps. At 9 a.m. you say, okay, let's fix a bug in front end repo. 10:30 you say, okay, let's update API in backend. Then 1 p.m. you decide, okay, let's do some changes in design system. 3 p.m. you say, okay, fix mobile app. And 5 p.m. you're confused like what you did in entire day. and then it's time to go home, or you just gave up, like, okay, let's wrap up and go home. I think it's done. I'm done for the day. And this is very common, right? I mean, I have done that too, where I was just after a few hours I was lost, like what I was doing. I mean, where I was supposed to make a change. So this is very common, right? But it costs something. So for example, if I have to do context switching, it takes almost 30 minutes. And we all know that, right? It's not that easy. Context switching is not for everyone. Now, I can agree there are some developers who have like amazing memory. They can just literally shuffle between 5 different IDEs and still know like what they are doing. But I think I'm getting old maybe. So, and then with polyrepos, this is a common problem. Like if more developers are actually switching between multiple repositories, sometime 5 to 10 repositories a day, which costs a number of hours, 2 to 4 hours daily. Like you're just shuffling between multiple repositories, trying to figure out what you need to do. And this is mental overhead, right? And understanding different commands, different environments, like how CI/CD works, how different code standards are. And this is the annual cost of doing all this. I'm not sure like what is the average salary here, but most of this research are done keeping a developer in US in mind, right? So I'm sure this is not the right one, but let's see. And this is one of the biggest problem for AI, because it needs to find out like the entire context. So if you have a polyrepo and you are trying to implement something in your front end, your AI is confused, like where is the backend? Cannot see anything. Where is the shared library you are using? Cannot see again anything. Now with all the agent harnesses, it is becoming better, but still it is a cost, because you know your AI needs to figure out how this repository look like. It needs to get that context. And then there is another problem with context window, right? So like the context windows are not very huge, like they cannot have the context of 10 different repositories available in the same context and then still work. They will hallucinate a lot. And it's always limited to current repositories, which is getting changed, right? You can always say, okay, go ahead and refer this repository, but remember, your AI also needs to get the entire context into the current window. And I think, let's see how big your context window is. I'm not sure, like, let's go back. And so for example, this is a monorepo. I created this and I say, okay, let's add a feature to make payment, because I don't have a payment implementation yet. This, by the way, this app works. So it's not, I mean, it's not something like Anthropic where you said they said this thing work and doesn't work. This app works. I can share the GitHub repository later. And then it starts to create this context. So in case you are not using VS Code, but VS Code gives you this information like how much context window is available. For example, it has used 8% of the context window, right? And as soon as you give more repositories to read from, it will try to hallucinate. I mean, as soon as it reaches to the end. So, and then as I'm in a monorepo, it's actually able to figure out, okay, started reading, okay, where I need to actually add the payment feature. So it will go through, okay, let's see this file, so let it do its job, and then we continue to go through the slides. And let's go back, okay, where is my, and I will try to wrap up in a few minutes. Yeah, I'm almost there. So with monorepo, of course, we saw the advantage that it has complete picture. From front end to back end, it knows every API. It doesn't need to actually fetch something else from different repositories. And of course, it has clear vision of how my shared library is. It has better context about how 10 different teams are shipping. It can give you recommendation as well based on the shared approach you have, right? How you can improve, maybe do much better. And has access to the entire dependency graph. The graph which I showed you, the NX graph, NX can read it via something called as tool calling. I know everyone knows about MCPs right now. So MCPs can do this, like you can build a tool and attach it to your MCP. NX does that a lot. And then context makes all the difference. For example, this is a simple code base where I say, okay, just go ahead and call this API, AI has no idea about how your backend looks like. It can just say, okay, maybe just add at least error handling, there is no catch, try and catch. But if it has more context about it, it can also give you more recommendation, saying, okay, you're using this API which is deprecated. Now it's only possible in case you are into a same repository, right? It can also see the breaking changes if you're into Monorepo, rather than actually you shipping code and then finally figure out. And as I said, like most of us are not writing code, we are just asking AI to do it. So let's make the future better for AI, right? So your AI can fail early and figure out, okay, what needs to be done. And AI learns from your patterns. So it's not like someone else is writing code, it's your code. So this is something which I don't like sometimes, because developers are so bad at writing tests. They just want every test to pass, and somehow at the end it learns from you and copies the same pattern, and now it's just writing the code which is passing every time. So there are some advantages, but you can still teach it, right? You can still teach by giving skills file, for example. You can always give a skill saying, okay, always question yourself like what you're doing. Or maybe if you're writing a test, try to cover all the edge cases, or maybe failure scenarios, which we generally don't. For example, this is a common pattern, right? So for example, React query is used for data fetching convention. This is how the API conventions are. AI gives you context. AI will tell you, okay, I figured out there are 3 ways possible in which you can do this implementation. I chose 2 because your current repositories follows this pattern. And you will, if you read the chat, you will figure out like there are some things like this in your context window or your chat, basically when you talk to AI. It gives you why it chose particular way to do something. And this is also maybe a sign where you can actually improve things. For example, if it is making a wrong choice, you can actually just go ahead and add a skill file saying, okay, don't do this, right? And it gets much better if you have if your AI has clear understanding about your monorepos. It learns from your past mistake. It learns from your cross-team knowledge, because everyone is contributing to the same code base, and then it has dependency awareness, and it's easier to analyze the code as well. So this is just a diagram in case you want to copy and then show it to your manager, saying, convincing them to move to Monorepo. I'll share the slides, you can just use it. And with AI plus human, this is the future we are going towards. Like, let's see what AI will be doing. So AI will be handling all the syntax and style. I'm not sure like if there are any developers exist who are just focused on the syntax. We don't care about syntax anymore. Like that era has gone, I think long gone now. And then thinking about how my dependency tree looks like, AI can handle that for you. Pattern compliance, like the same pattern code or same pattern should be followed for all the API naming convention. You don't have to worry about it, AI can do that. Performance anti-patterns, because there are so many anti-patterns which are shared, AI knows all these things. Security vulnerabilities, which we are really bad at it, right? I mean, we can just install any package which solves our problem. I think we all have done that, right? Oh, this new add function, let's use it. And then documentation, it can also improve your documentation. What are we supposed to do? So of course we can focus more on the business logic, right? Because AI still is not there. They don't understand your business. AI doesn't understand your business, to be frank. And sometimes it will just give you a random input, say, okay, do this, and go ahead and do that. And then someone has to tell how to structure things. This is architectural patterns, right? That's something which you have done in last 5-10 years. That's your experience which you have to use here. Then team communication. AI cannot talk to people, right? I think. I'm sure it can, but still, like, it's your job will be communicating across the teams, like how we want to go ahead and build softwares. And then problem solving. More and more open source developers I speak to, they like using AI. The only problem is they don't like how a bad AI is at inventing something. I think there are research also available, right, where it says AI is good at doing maybe your business as usual thing, but they are not good at inventing things. If you have to create a new API, that's your call, right? That's your thought process, like how you want to build this API. And product strategy. Now you know your customers. Your AI doesn't know your customer unless you give it more context and want your job to be gone. So be careful. Getting started with monorepos. This is a common, like, how you can actually start moving to monorepos from today. So of course, first thing is, of course, you can create a monorepo. Start moving some projects. Don't go big bang, like start moving all the projects. Celonis took a year to migrate everything. So we didn't like just went crazy because we saw the improvements. It's not like we wanted to just go ahead and migrate everything. So start small. Do some maybe for PR reviews, go ahead and use some tool. Static analysis. Figure out like which tools works for which linting tools or linting rules works best for you. Just go ahead and configure them. Start moving new code base. Start seeing like one thing which you should always do when you add a new project, check your graph. That's important because one wrong import can screw up your entire graph. And then train and iterate. Now you have all the context, AI can do all this refinement for you, right? And then scale. Keep adding more projects and keep expanding it to different teams. And AI first development, I think this is the future, right? So we are going more and more towards AI driven development rather than now developer doing most of the stuff. I think 24 is like where AI came as a reviewer, like CodeRabbit was launched in 24 to help developers review their code base. And now we are actually using, in 2026, it's like we are just guiding agents, go ahead and do that, go ahead and do that, and then we are just monitoring. And 2027, I think it will just go more, and you will just coordinate with multiple teams. Your job will be coordinating and seeing like, okay, if everything is fine or not. And people have started building this, right? For example, Codex, Cursor, they also have now tools where you can just run an agent from your mobile phone. You can see what your agents are doing on your mobile phone. You're just maybe having some dinner with your family and then everything is still working, right? So I think this is the future. I'll just skip this. There are some references I've added, so you can actually just go ahead and see this references. And let's see if my agent was able to complete the job which we gave. Yeah, so it's already done. So it says, okay, these are the different files which are modified. This is the flow, this is how it looks like. And it also added the APIs somehow, new files created. Right, so I can give a talk, meanwhile my agent can actually complete the job. So yep, that's it. Demo is done. This is just about CodeRabbit. It's free for open source. And most important thing, this is one poem I really like about. So in God we trust, all others must go through a code review. So of course, make sure everything you write is code reviewed, right? So don't believe anything blindly. And this is where I end my talk. So